So now we are going to make whipping cream. Okay, so this whipping cream, we could call it stabilized whipping cream. I'd prefer using stabilized whipping cream in most of the cake decorating areas, only because we don't know in what home environment most of my students would be working, and say suppose there are issues when the whipping cream frosting could just kind of get very loose and it wouldn't stay as you're going to do the sharp edges or work with any kind of decoration. So there are two kinds of methods in which you could stabilize a whipping cream. One is using the corn flour and the whipping cream to make a slurry, cooking the corn flour with the whipping cream itself and make a slurry, cool it down and then add that paste into the whipping cream when we are going to beat the whipping cream to stiff peaks stage. The other one, which I'm not going to do as part of this lesson, is the one that uses gelatin. Obviously, because when gelatin comes in picture, then we have to be thinking about the alternative for a wedge version of the gelatin, and would it work in the same way as the gelatin works to stabilize the whipping cream. Also, the gelatin version of the stabilized whipping cream gives a very spongy texture at the end. So, for that reason, together with the substitute of gelatin, I just don't want to use the gelatin's stabilized whipping cream. So this one works quite well for me. It stays stable for the most of the time that I want to do the sharp edges, and it just remains stiffer for a longer period of time. So it just allows me to go keep working on my cake, and because it stays stiff, even if I'm going to fold it a few times during the time, like an hour or two, it is going to stay there and help me, give me longer duration of time for me to work on the cake. So to start with, I have the whipping cream. Now, should you really stabilize a non-dairy whipping cream? There comes a question. Like I said, there is definitely a difference between using the stabilized non-dairy whipping cream as well, because it allows the time. The non-dairy whipping cream without the addition of these components that is going to stabilize it, it is going to kind of become runny, loosen up. If you're going to be a beginner, like if you're a beginner and if you're going to work with it for a prolonged period of time, it is not going to allow you, or it's not going to help you. It's going to loosen up. The just the non-dairy and that you whip and start using will be a little difficult. So you could start with using the stabilized whipping cream, and if you like it, you could do. But later on, once you get the hang of the entire process of getting the sharp edges on the whipping cream, and you feel like making the slurry is like one extra step, and you you overcome that phase, and just whipping the whipping cream and then using it on the cake works quite fine for you. You could just follow that as well. But in this course, you're just going to follow the stabilized whipping cream method. And if you are one who are using dairy whipping cream, obviously the fat percentage should be 35% of fat and above is what you will choose to use for whipping, that you will use to frost the cake. Non-dairy whipping cream users, doesn't matter, whatever is available in your baking supply store, you could just get that. And this is a non-dairy whipping cream that I'm using. So this will go into the cooking and making the slurry. It is important to use the same whipping cream that you will use to whip. Now here, say suppose like I have a non-dairy whipping cream that I want to whip, and can I use like a 25% fat cream to make the slurry? No. So it's important that this cream will also whip. So if it is a dairy cream, this will be a 35% fat or above, or you will use a non-dairy whipping cream like I am using now. Okay, so I will add the cream. That's icing sugar and corn flour. I'm just going to mix this first. Switch on the stove. So I'm going to keep whisking until this, you can see the flour gets cooked up and this entire thing will turn into a translucent mixture. So you want to wait until it thickens up a bit. So it's starting to thicken. You can see it's just bubbling up as well. You can see it's just thicker than the previous stage. And to cook up a few more seconds, like say less than a minute. So now you can see the mixture is just turned a bit translucent. Okay, so at this stage I'm just going to stop cooking this. So the stage where you just need to stop it. Okay. So I'm into this. I'm going to add the vanilla now. And then mix it up. So it's the color of the vanilla, so that doesn't matter. It wouldn't affect the final look, the color of the whipping cream that you will be doing. Okay, so after getting cooled down, this will thicken up a bit more. So what I'm going to do now is just pour this into the bowl. And then I'm going to use a cling wrap, and it needs to be surface wrapped because it could form a film on the top, and that will come in between like smaller lumps when you use this along with the whipping cream to beat. So surface wrap is going all the way, touching the surface. So touch the surface. And then let it cool down in room temperature until it's just kind of okay to handle, like it's not like extremely hot. And after that it needs to go into the fridge, say for about 4 hours or maybe 2 to 4 hours, and it should be like completely chilled before we are ready to use it on the whipping cream. So now for the whipping cream, it needs to be in a liquid state but in refrigerator, because the non-dairy whipping cream usually we store that in the freezer and that will be in a solid chunk state, right? So like an hour before, you can just remove the non-dairy whipping cream from the freezer, and if you want to allow it to thaw quickly, an hour should be fine, like keeping it in room temperature so the solid chunks of the non-dairy whipping cream becomes liquid. But keeping it like really long hours and allowing the whipping cream to come to room temperature is not good for us to whip, because it's not going to whip like really well. So it needs to be in liquid state and it needs to be cold from the refrigerator, and this also should be cold and completely chill in the refrigerator. So all of the time, like maybe 4 hours should be good. And once that is done, I'll get back to show how you're going to use this paste on the whipping cream and then make our stabilized whipping cream. So now I'm just going to start whipping the whipping cream. The slurry, the corn flour paste is cooled down, and after it's cooled down, that's how it's going to look. Okay, so I have that, and for additional sweetness, I also have castor sugar. If you feel like that quantity of castor sugar is like too sweet for you, then you could just cut down on that. Okay, and that's about the non-dairy whipping cream. It's in the liquid state and it's cool, really chilled. Okay, so I'm just going to add the whipping cream, all the contents into the bowl of the stand mixer. So then I'm going to start whipping the whipping cream, and as the beater is running, I'm going to add the castor sugar a little at a time, like a tablespoon at a time, until I'm done with using up all the sugar. Now after that, I'll continue to beat for some more time until I start seeing soft peaks. At that stage, I'm going to add the slurry again, a tablespoon at a time as the beater is running, and then we will have the stiff peaks stabilized whipping cream that's made. So like let it beat for about a minute and then start adding the sugar. So just want to show just after stopping to add the sugar. So that's how it's looking. It's still not stiff, but just about to getting the stiff peaks. Okay, so I'm going to continue beating, say for about 30 seconds to about a minute, and then I can start adding the slurry, the corn flour paste. Just want to show how the consistency of the paste looks after it's cooled down. It's just gotten a bit thicker than what it was when we just finished cooking that. Okay, so this I'm just going to keep adding as the beater is running. I'm just going to scrape down the sides. Also, you could just see the part where the beater blade was just going on. It's kind of really stiff in the middle. You obviously just want to take the entire thing into the center so everything gets incorporated again. So you can really feel the extra stiffness and the stability. So you can keep mixing, a few number of times, and it's just not going to turn liquidy. But the other thing that I'd like to do is to kind of whip beyond a state, and which is like over whipping. So I could just soften up anytime I want, and even if it is like kind of getting a bit dried up, over whipped, I could add a teaspoon of milk at a time and then just whisk it so the air bubbles, the dryness will just settle down, and then I will have the right consistency whipped cream. But keeping it in soft peak stage and then stopping to beat, then it is difficult to take back into the stiff peaks stage. So always we could whip it like really stiff and then soften up as we need. Also, because if you're going to add color, you're again going to fold it. Like if you're going to mix it with any of the flavoring elements like your caramel sauce or your fruit compotes, again you're going to fold it. So you just need to have that leverage for you to keep folding, as it will soften up at each stage, getting the liquid components from the gel colors or your compotes or additional flavoring elements. And after the addition of all of that, your whipping cream element should be stiff for you to be able to cover the cake. So for that, you just need to keep beating a little longer to have a stabilized stiff peaks or a bit overly whipped cream. Okay. So it's been whipping up, say, for about 5 minutes now. It's like really stiff, but there's no air bubbles or dryness, and that's what you will have if you're going to stabilize. So the vanilla flavor comes from the slurry that was added, and if you're not going to use the slurry, the stabilization, then you could add vanilla when you're beating the whipping cream itself. So this is for future whenever you decide not to use the slurry, but initial lessons we're just going to follow using this one. Okay. Okay, so that's the beautiful. You can see the slurries, whatever vanilla we added, it's not changed the color. So you could just even fold it a few times, and we'll know as I'm going to use it on the cake, we'll know how to actually use it to get smooth finish. But this is the stabilized whipping cream that you could just use it for making frosting, doing your piping and all the other whipped cream decorations. This is going to come in handy without loosening its stiffness. Okay, so catch you up on the other lesson where I'll show you how to use this whipped cream.